What's up, guys? Looking at a special Monday 2-game slate for DraftKings. Looking at the Tennessee Titans versus the Miami Dolphins and the Detroit Lions versus the Seattle Seahawks. One game is clearly standing out on top of the other game as the game to target in this slate. But what if there are some pieces on the other game that would be under-owned that we could use to get our lineups different? We'll take a look at that right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching a special 2-game slate for Monday Night Football. We've been getting a couple of these lately. This is week 4, and I'm going to take a look at the Titans versus the Dolphins and the Lions versus the Seahawks. And I'll dig into that in a second. Make sure to hit the like button. Looking for 30 likes so I can put out a shorter video later on. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm only 50 off of hitting that 1,000 mark I've been trying to hit for the past few weeks. So if you guys can hit that subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate that. If you like this content, you want to hit subscribe anyways to get the alert when the shorter video comes out. You can sign up for alerts once you're subscribed to the channel. So let's dig right into this. It's going to be an interesting slate because the obvious game to target is going to be the Seattle versus Lions game. But we have a game in Tennessee and Miami that has some guys with plenty of upside, a lot of upside pieces in that game in general. But the problem is it's got a couple incompetent quarterbacks. But both of these quarterbacks have shown upside in the past. But we got a very low total on this one, 37.5 points. And Tennessee is favored by 2.5 points. Snoop Huntley coming off the street for Miami, replacing the Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle that we saw last week. Those guys completely inadequate, not able to put up any type of fight for the team. So they've gone to the streets and taken Snoop Huntley as their new quarterback. Huntley, of course, was a quarterback for the Ravens for the past couple seasons. Had some upside games. One game, he was one of the top overall scorers on the week. So we've seen upside out of Huntley in the past. He's got some running upside, and Dolphins turned to him to spark some type of life into the team, with Tua on IR with concussions and the other quarterbacks just not being able to cut it. He's had a $5,500 salary. Jared Goff in a situation where he hasn't really done great this year. He hasn't scored over 16 DraftKings points. He's playing against a tough Seattle defense run by a defensive-minded coach in Mike McDonald, who's been pretty good this year. He hasn't really faced any tough competition yet, though. But they handled Jared Goff last season as the coach of the Ravens. So Jared Goff could easily dud in this spot as well. And Geno Smith has the most upside, I think, on the slate from a quarterback perspective, or the most floor, I should say, of any quarterback on the slate. He's got the weapons. He's got the history against this defense, and the Seahawks have been playing great. You can see he's got 18, 21, and 13 DraftKings points in his 3 games. But Geno Smith has been playing well this year. They got a new coaching system and new offensive coordinator, the whole deal, and he's got the weapons on top of it. And he's got a good matchup against Detroit's defense, which is pretty weak against the pass. The other option is Will Levis. Will Levis was the guy that Tennessee was trying to build the team around, but he really hasn't shown too much upside. He had a couple games last year where we thought that maybe he was going to be a stud, or not, like maybe a guy that would have some fantasy relevance. But so far this season, he hasn't really done too much. DeAndre Hopkins has been hurt for most of this season, or at least recovering from injury. So Will Levis missing one of his top go-to guys in the offense from a health perspective. So if we go to running back position, we got A-Chain, who had to struggle last week without Tua. Without Tua, this offense just doesn't function, basically. And the team really didn't put the resources into finding a Tua backup, even though Tua's been hurt multiple times with concussions, but the team did not invest in a competent backup, and that's why we see Tyler Huntley being pulled in to try and spark this team. And I do think that Tyler Huntley helps Devin A-Chain a little bit, because Huntley is a running quarterback, and that'll take a little bit of the tension off the run game as far as the running backs, and maybe put a little bit more on Huntley. So that might leave some lanes open for A-Chain tonight, but he's expensive at 7,200. And as far as his ownership projection, projected to be the highest owned running back on the slate as well. As far as his matchup, not the well, he's got a pretty good matchup, actually. Now I look at it, it's like 23.7 DraftKings points a game is what Tennessee is giving up to opposing run defenses. Gibbs and Montgomery are the running backs for Detroit. Both very good running backs. Seattle, on the other hand, is a good run defense. Problem with Seattle's run defense this week is that they are all injured. Their defensive line is basically all out. They're missing 4 starters on the defensive line. That's going to open things up for Detroit to take advantage of with their run game. And Gibbs and Montgomery, both upside running backs. You can see they're both averaging over 17 DraftKings points a game. Question is, will they both hit? Can they both hit? Will one of them hit? Which one of them has the best potential matchup? A lot of questions about, which one or both should we start? David Montgomery, 24 DraftKings points last week, 17 the week before that, 16 the prior week. Gibbs also doing well, 16, 17, and 17. As far as Montgomery, Seattle is not allowing a lot of receiving work done by the running backs, so that might give a little bit of edge to Montgomery, at least for me. And he's the cheaper of the 2 backs. Montgomery might be the better guy in this matchup, but as we've seen with Gibbs, he can break one off at any time. So, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Sorry, I got to take a drink there. My throat's a little scratchy. Kenneth Walker is returning from injury this week. Does not have an injury designation, but he missed the first, last couple weeks anyways. And Charbonnet had been taking his spot. Charbonnet is really expensive at 6,200 for a guy that probably or might not get like much work tonight. And he's going against a top run defense anyways, both these guys. So Seattle running backs may be off the radar today. Tennessee's running backs also have a good matchup against Miami. Miami's giving up 27.5 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, which makes Pollard interesting at 6K. And it also makes his backup Spears interesting at 4,900. Spears might be my favorite play on the slate from a running back perspective, just because of his price. We're looking for salary relief on this slate, and Spears might be the best salary relief. There's been coach speak talking about using him more. They have yet to implement that, but you saw he got 4 targets last week, 2 targets the week before that, and 4 targets in week 1, but he really hasn't been getting a ton of attempts. So going to wide receiver, we got Jameson Williams. We got Smith and Jigba at the top here. As far as I'm sorry, we got Amon-Ra. I was going to say Amon-Ra St. Brown, the most expensive of the wide receivers. He has a pretty good matchup against Seattle. if he doesn't have to face those perimeter corners, Woolen and Witherspoon. So St. Brown might have the best matchup on Detroit's side if they don't travel into the slot with him. And, that would set him up for a decent night. He's at 8,200, probably be popular tonight as well. Tyreek Hill, expensive for a guy without a competent quarterback, but obviously we've seen the upside with Tyreek Hill. He's in a man coverage situation tonight because Tennessee runs a lot of man coverage, and Tyreek Hill obviously can beat man coverage, and he has the ability to get targeted plenty of times tonight. I think from a ownership perspective as well. Now, this is all thinking, if we want to get a little bit different from that Detroit game, Tyreek is looking at a, like sub 15% ownership tonight. So, I mean, we're talking about trying to get a little bit different with upside guys like Tyreek would be at the top of that list. DK Metcalf at 6,800 is also interesting because the Detroit secondary has been pretty bad this year. They're giving up, they're giving up 21.5 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, and DK Metcalf could easily exploit that defense, and they'll likely need to exploit that defense because if they can't get the run game going and they want to keep this game competitive without a defensive line, then you're going to have to put up some points. So looking on to the next player, we got Calvin Ridley. Similar situation to Tyreek. He's just got attached to a quarterback who's not very good. He did get 24 DraftKings points in week 2. As far as his ownership for Calvin Ridley, looking at sub 20% owned. So you see these high-powered weapons in this secondary game are looking pretty tasty from an ownership perspective. And Ridley is a guy with plenty of upside that's going to be lower owned than some of these other guys. And he's got a quarterback that is still a starter. So he's not going with a backup quarterback. Maybe a backup caliber quarterback, but not a backup quarterback. Jalen Waddle, similar situation to Tyreek. When he's with a quarterback other than Tua, he doesn't perform very well. I believe with Tyreek, I was reading Rich Rebar's article, and he said something like Tyreek has not scored a touchdown with a quarterback on Miami that was not named Tua. With Waddle, we're looking at, again, sub 20% owned. So you're going to see a lot of these guys in the second game are going to be sub 20% owned. Well, this is the actual first game, but as far as the marquee matchup, it's a secondary game on this slate. Jameson Williams, he's got a tough matchup against those Seattle secondary, and he might be outmatched for this matchup. Depending on his ownership, would determine whether or not he's startable. I see him currently at around 36% owned. I'm not interested. I'd rather take a chance on those other receivers in that other game, especially with like Tennessee, with Miami giving up 15.5 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. That's a pretty good matchup for them. Tennessee's only giving up 8.7 DraftKings points to wideouts, so not so good for the Miami wide receivers. But Tennessee might have the prime spot for us to look if we want to get a little bit different on the slate as far as inserting some starting caliber wide receivers that have a lot of upside. All right, so we're looking at the next guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Has got a ton of upside tonight. I think that they'll need to use him significant amount of passes. Our target should be targeted to Smith-Njigba tonight because they're going to struggle to run the ball against Detroit. So they're going to want to stay on the field, keep that defense off the field. That's missing all those defensive linemen. And the best way to do that is going to be maybe short passes to Njigba, who was going to have the best matchup on the on the Seattle side. And we've seen those slot receivers take advantage of this Detroit defense throughout the season. As far as an ownership perspective, he's probably, he's over 50% owned, but it's for a good reason. And I don't think he's necessarily someone that we want to fade tonight. Although he does have, he has shown downside, as you saw last week, where he only scored 3 targets, and week 1 where he only had 2 targets. So he does have the potential to put up an ugly game, but I think in tonight's matchup, it makes too much sense for him to be used. But like I said, he does have the downside risk too. DeAndre Hopkins is at 5,300. He's even cheaper than Njigba. And Hopkins is coming in. I mean, I don't even see an ownership projection for Hopkins, honestly. So let me look and see if I can get a different set of projections up here. So Hopkins, I see him at 0% owned, which is strange. Because I would expect him to be, have some sort of a projection here. Well, I'll take a look at him later. But on 2 projection sites, I have not seen like a projected ownership for DeAndre Hopkins. As far as I know, he's playing tonight. I have not heard anything about him not playing tonight. So maybe keep an eye on his status ahead of game time. But if he's going in at like sub 5% owned, he had 7 targets last week against Green Bay, 19 DraftKings points. So maybe he's looking healthier. Check out his snap count. DeAndre Hopkins, 27% in week 1, 44 in week 2, 46 in week 3. So still getting less than 50% of the snaps. But, Tennessee season basically on the line tonight. Expect DeAndre Hopkins to maybe get his snap count bumped up in a winnable game. Tyler Lockett, another guy, he's aging. He's struggling to get targets. He's probably going to be the lowest owned though on this side of the matchup. We're looking at about a 45%. So he's still high owned. All these guys are going to be high owned on the Seattle Detroit game. So keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. You're going to want to make probably a sacrifice at one spot, at least as far as wide receivers, to try to get different, or at least with this secondary game. Obviously, you have to put at least one player from the other game in there, but I do think that if you use a couple guys from this game, then you are significantly going to improve your chances of moving up the rankings. Tyler Boyd, slot receiver for Tennessee, another guy. He's been getting the targets, 5 targets, 4 targets. Hasn't really done too much with it. As far as his matchup, the slot receivers for Tennessee, they don't have a bad matchup. He doesn't have a bad matchup with Miami giving up 10.8 DraftKings points a game to the slot. And his DVOA matchup looks pretty good on top of it. So Tyler Boyd might be a guy worth considering tonight. If Njigba gets one of those 3-target games and Boyd gets a 5-target game, and Boyd can outscore Njigba at a cheaper price, then Boyd could be a key to winning the slate, or at least getting yourself ahead of the field. And Boyd is looking at a sub 20% ownership. So Boyd would be a good leverage spot if you think that he can outscore Njigba in particular, or really any of these guys. But like for Boyd to outscore Amon-Ra or DK Metcalf is a little more far-fetched than him outscoring Njigba based on what we've seen out of Boyd's target share and Njigba's targets so far this season. Khalif Raymond is another one of these secondary receivers. 4 targets in week 2, but nothing really beyond that. Beyond that, we got Tim Patrick. Patrick's a gritty kind of guy, fits that Detroit mentality. Picked up off of waivers after Denver dropped him. Just got signed off the practice squad at the end of September. And, Tim Patrick is a guy that had, like a role locked up in Denver. And then a couple preseasons in a row, he got hurt. And Denver just cut bait on him, and Detroit picked him up. Smart pickup by Detroit. Kind of fits their MO for guys that they like to target, like the guy was with, the island of misfit toys type of guys. And Tim Patrick is the type of player I think that could, fit well with that identity. And Tim Patrick, don't be surprised to see him, take on, maybe a type of Josh Reynolds role that, not to take away work from Jameson Williams, but to be that 4th guy on the Detroit side that they like to go to in some situations. Especially if Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra might be taking up the looks of those top corners on Seattle. Maybe Khalif Raymond or Tim Patrick are the guys that end up taking advantage of that. Treylon Burks, I don't know what he's done this year. 3 targets last week, 2 targets in week 1. He hasn't done anything, 3,100, but, he's a guy that's had upside in the past. He just hasn't delivered on anything. And I think beyond that, I think that's about all we want to look at for wide receivers. Laporta for tight end, I think has obviously the most upside. He has yet to break out this year. I think he probably will be the highest owned guy on the slate. Noah Fant looks like he's the highest owned guy, followed by Sam Laporta. Both of them are over 30%. But Sam Laporta, obviously has a ton of upside. Okonkwo, he's really not getting that many snaps, and he's the second most expensive guy on the slate, versus Miami, who has been giving up about 9 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. Laporta has a better matchup with Seattle giving up 11 DraftKings points a game, and I believe that tight ends versus Seattle are getting the fourth most yards or 4th most targets out of tight ends in the league. Tight end matchups in the league. Fant, mentioned him earlier. He had 6 targets, 6 receptions last week, but this Detroit matchup, not a great matchup. Detroit's only giving up 5.3 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. Brock Wright, back up to Laporta. If you think that Laporta might still be hurt, he might be interesting. Jonnu Smith does not have a great matchup against Tennessee, who's only giving up 3.3 DraftKings points a game. But let's see who Tennessee has faced. Tennessee's faced Green Bay, who has decent tight ends. They faced Conklin over in the Jets, and they faced Kmet and Everett over in Chicago. So they haven't faced bad tight ends. So maybe there's something to that, only allowing 3.3 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. And, that makes Jonnu kind of an easy scratch for this slate. But I think I play it safe with Laporta, go with a guy with upside. We can get different somewhere else. Defenses, you could take your choice on these defenses. Any one of these defenses could do something tonight. Let's take a look at building a lineup. I think the First one we build is going to be the chalkier build. I think Geno will be the most popular quarterback on the slate. He's, in my opinion, he has the best matchup, and they're going to need to throw because they're not going to be able to run on Detroit. And on top of that, just not being able to run on Detroit, they're going to want to keep on the field to keep the defense off the field. And I think that those, like those short passes are going to be the way to do it for these Lions. I mean, for these Seahawks. So I want to pair him with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I think will be a target monster this week. And I want to pair him with DK Metcalf, who I think can beat that secondary, and he has in the past. They've played each other the last couple years. I want Amon-Ra in this build, and I want to get David Montgomery in there because if they have a weakened defensive line, I think the Lions, they want to be a run-first team, and that fits Montgomery obviously perfectly. As far as the defense, I would want to go probably, let's go with the Titans. And with running backs, we already got one of those. Let's put in Laporta, see where that leaves us. As you can see, it's like it's pretty easy to build in this slate. Make sure to hit that like button. Looking for 30 likes to put out a shorter video later on. And make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm about 50 off of 1,000, so help me get to that 1,000 mark. Another running back that we can put in this one. Well, let's put in our flex first. If I'm looking at flex players, let's see. Probably put in a guy like, we could put in a guy like well, let's put in our next running back and then do the flex. I want to put in one of these Tennessee running backs, but I don't want to put in Pollard because that's going to only leave us with not enough money. I'm going to put in Spears instead to take advantage of that matchup. It's going to leave us with 3,500 for the flex. That puts us with guys like Fant, Khalif Raymond, Jonnu Smith, Tim Patrick. One of these guys, these low-owned guys, it kind of forces us to pick a low-owned guy, which I don't mind. You could rotate guys in even, but you can get a lot in your lineup with, targeting that high-scoring game. If we want to target a little bit of differentiation here, let's do that move where we take out Smith and Jigba. Let's put in Smith and Jigba was how much? Smith and Jigba was 5,500. If we put in like Hopkins over Smith and Jigba, and Hopkins has, I don't know what's going on with the ownership projection on Hopkins. Let me take a look and make sure that he's even like playing, or there's nothing about him not playing. Because there's no way that he's going to be projected at 0% ownership tonight. I don't see any news about him not playing tonight. I just wanted to make sure that I'm not missing something. But yeah, I don't see any ownership projections for him. So either people are projecting him not even to register an ownership, which I see unlikely. But if that is the case, then that gives us an easy guy to plug and play to differentiate ourselves. Leaves us with 3,700. Adds a couple guys on there like Okonkwo. If you wanted to take out Hopkins, let's look at other receiving options here. Boyd and Lockett. We could put either one of those guys in. Let's put in Lockett. Well, Lockett's still got like 35% ownership, so I don't want to put in Lockett. I think Boyd would be the lowest guy I go here for this range. That leaves us with 4,800. Puts us with guys like Jalen Wright. Mostert might be back tonight. You want to keep an eye on that news if you consider Jalen Wright. A bunch of these other running backs. And you got Okonkwo, Khalif Raymond, Jonnu Smith, guys like that still. So that's a direction, like if you want to swap out Njigba and, basically consider that he's going to get less work than maybe anticipated. With Geno and the captain, I'd likely want to put him with two receivers. So I probably would put him with that Lockett play instead, which leaves us with 4K. Or you could put in Fant. Double tight end might be the way to differentiate on this one. Bob Gomes brought up a good point where on the 2-game slate last week, he suggested maybe putting in 2 of the Bills running backs. So maybe this particular slate, instead of 2 of the Bills, we put in those 2 Titans running backs. So let's go Pollard and let's go Spears. Because as I mentioned, they have that the running backs in this Tennessee-Miami game have the best matchups on the slate, right? And they got, as far as the ownership, let's take a look at the ownership. Ownership for those guys are, 45 for Pollard, and Spears is hovering around 20. So if you wanted to use these guys, there's probably not many people that are going to use them together. So that'd be one way to get different. Then we can get Njigba back in there, who has that good matchup. Why can't I find him? Here he is. Leaves us with 3,900 again. That leaves us in that range where we can pick one of these dudes. But I mean, that gets you significantly different if you wanted to target that main game. And it kind of fits with the narrative that I might anticipate for that game, where if Geno is forced to throw the ball because they can't run and they're able to hit with Metcalf and Njigba, that's going to force Goff to throw the ball as well. And, that's going to obviously help out with St. Brown and Laporta. And that would explain why we have no running backs. Let's say the scheme is more impactful than the defensive line itself in helping to make Seattle one of the better run defenses in the league. And, let's say that Detroit can't get anything going on the run despite the injuries. And that would set up Pollard and Spears maybe in a tandem to do well against Miami, as they're trying to keep the ball away from Will Levis's decision-making. And obviously with a weak opponent like Miami is right now, they want to take advantage of, just trying to demoralize them and run all over them or whatever. So good potential there for the storytelling, and a couple of guys that are pretty low owned, but fit a good narrative there. So that's one way you could do it. If you want to take those guys out, let's go back in with Montgomery. And let's put Tajay back in there. Let's swap out of Geno. Let's say that we want to go with maybe let's go with Levis because he has the most familiarity. And he's got the better matchup as far as the second game. So let's go with Levis. He's also going to be the least owned guy. But we've seen Levis been able to to have a little bit of upside in the pass. Let's say Smith and Jigba's the odd man out, and let's put in Hopkins. No, let's put in Ridley at 5,900. So we got Levis to Spears and Ridley. That's a game where, they might be playing from behind. So maybe we go, let's take Spears out and let's put in Pollard. That leaves us in that 2,700 spot. If we wanted to, you know what, let's tell that secondary story. Let's say that, Montgomery I got in there. So let's put in Gibbs and Montgomery. Let's say that Detroit is able to run all over that wounded defense. I'm going to take let's take Metcalf out and let's put Njigba in. It's going to leave us with 5,600 per guy. Reasoning behind all this is Levis stacked with Ridley. The running game is having success against that banged up D-line. We got Laporta in there, maybe getting the, like the short targets or whatever. The only guy that they're passing to or having success passing to. We got Smith and Jigba on the other side. Let's put in Metcalf too. Well, if we do that, then we're going to want to put in Geno, obviously. But so let's take Metcalf out. Let's put in Hill as our run back. That leaves us with 3,400. Khalif Raymond, Jonnu Smith, guys like that. Let's see, Will Levis to Ridley. If we got Will Levis in the captain, he's either running a touchdown in or he's got to have two receivers. Let's swap out Hill. And let's put in Hopkins. We're going to have a guy coming back on the Miami side too to really justify that. So it'd have to be like Waddle in this build. Just make sure that you have your flex guy from the second game. If we wanted to do Huntley's a guy that might be a better guy to go, but I think he's going to be higher owned than Levis. Like the leverage that we want from Levis is him being the lowest owned of the running backs, but Huntley's not too far behind him. So let's put Huntley in there. Huntley's a guy you can run naked. You could run. We could do that Geno lineup. Let's do that Geno lineup again. So let's put Geno in there. Let's get rid of that guy. We're going to put in Amon-Ra. We're going to put in Metcalf. We're going to put in Spears. Not in the flex, though. I'm going to put in Spears. Let's swap out Geno for Huntley because we know we can run Huntley naked. So really, it doesn't matter. We just need Huntley to outscore Geno in this scenario, and he does that by maybe running in a touchdown or two. Leaves us with 3,900 in the flex. I mean, this is a way that you could get different. Really, it's a build that favors, not a lot of offensive output in the Huntley game, other than Huntley running wild with the scrambles, maybe finding his way in the end zone once or twice, and just generally being able to outscore Geno and Goff and Levis with his legs. But meanwhile, Geno's able to put up, a passer Let's see what some of Gino's scores are. Let's say Gino's able to put up 22 DraftKings points, and Huntley puts up 23, right? So this scenario, you could have Njigba and Metcalf put up decent weeks. Let's say Njigba had 26 DraftKings points, and Metcalf had 31 DraftKings points. That was the week where Gino had his 21 DraftKings points. So they have their huge weeks, and Gino, puts up 21 DraftKings points. All we would need from Huntley is to score 21 DraftKings. We've seen these running quarterbacks do that like pretty easily without putting up any real like passing stats. So it's completely doable there. But if you wanted to put him with somebody, maybe instead of Spears, you put him with Wright or something like that. I don't particularly like that. Let's check out the Mostert. Isn't expected to play Monday night. That is as of this morning. So there's a few different ways. I'm gonna get this. I got to get this show posted and up. But you can see the thinking there when you're building on these 2-game slates. Just try to get different in like 1 or 2 spots. The Gino and the Goff lineups are going to build themselves, but you got to try to take those lineups that you come up with and think, how can I get a little bit of leverage on it? So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Hit that like button. Give me the 30 likes. Hit subscribe. I'm looking for 50 more subscribes to hit 1,000, and I appreciate that. And I will see you guys a little bit later.